Welcome to the Fatal Facts of Fentanyl. This is dedicated to raising awareness of the illicit fentanyl crisis hitting the USA. It is killing tens of thousands of people who suffer from substance abuse, disorders, and first-time users. There are no boundaries. It is straight across the board with a number of deaths without any regard to race, sex, socioeconomics, age, education, religious background, or location. It is in every community within our country. The fentanyl crisis is deadlier than ever before for various reasons. It is time to address the many issues surrounding this crisis. It is time to listen and learn from experts. It is time to hear the many stories from people who have lost their loved ones due to death by deception. Change begins with each of us as individuals and collaboration with others towards this positive transformation. The goal is to save lives and families from this travesty. Awareness and education are the key. Knowledge is power. I am your host, Lisa Carol Cood, an educator and advocate to help bring awareness to the fentanyl crisis touching every facet of our society. I am a mother who recently lost her son to fentanyl poisoning. I know firsthand the pain of grief surrounding the loss of my firstborn son. I created this podcast in hopes of channeling my heartbreak and put my energy into trying to prevent similar tragedies. I find solace and strength in working to spare other families a similar grief and any person battling this addiction. Tragedy has a way of being something powerful. This is in honor of my beautiful son's life, forever 32. Right here on Fatal Facts of Fentanyl, you will learn from experts on the front line combating the many issues surrounding fentanyl. You will hear personal stories from families and friends who have lost their loved ones and have taken their grief and pain to turn it around to make positive changes and bring awareness and education. You will also listen to people who have struggled with an opioid addiction and are still struggling and are now in active recovery. All of us share a common bond. We are all here to make a difference. We are all here to bring you the fatal facts of fentanyl. After his son's tragic death, a Louisiana pharmacist and father goes to extreme measures to expose the rampant corruption behind the opiate addiction crisis in the United States. If you haven't done so already, please watch the Netflix docuseries called The Pharmacist, featuring Dan Schneider and his family, to gain awareness and first-hand knowledge of their relentless effort to find the killer of their son, Danny. On their journey, more doors opened to all issues surrounding this drug crisis. They do say, when one door closes, another one opens. I am honored and pleased to present to our audience Mr. Dan Schneider, who has moved forward and through those open doors and has devoted his energy in combating now the fentanyl crisis in our country, all in hopes of bringing positive changes and all in honor and deep love for his beloved son. Welcome, Dan. Thank you for this interview. You are a wealth of information dealing with the facts about fentanyl poisoning, now facing not only seasoned users, but first-time users. Please elaborate on this subject for us, Dan.
I'll be glad to. Number one, I appreciate this time together with you. We always want to spread awareness and educate. And when we're talking about fentanyl, it is responsible. We had 93,000 overdose deaths last year reported by the CDC, and of those, we understand about 80% of them were fentanyl related deaths. And there's a bunch of different categories of the fentanyl deaths. You have your person that is a long-term drug user, okay, that just incidentally or accidentally overdoses with fentanyl, which is much easier to do because it's extremely potent. Just as an example, if you empty like a Splendor bag, artificial sugar, empty it completely, wet your finger, swab the inside. There's a trace amount left. If you taste it, you taste sweet. If that's fentanyl, that will kill a novice. But a more seasoned person, it might take a little bit more than that. Lots of times they think they can survive fentanyl, okay? They may be aware that it's there and they think they can survive it. Or they go into a rehab and they come back out and they take a lot less of the drug because they know it may contain fentanyl. Now that's one category. Then there's another whole category of fentanyl users that are dying, okay, that maybe or the drug users, they have a history, okay, and have a problem, but they tend to not be aware that fentanyl is present. In fact, they may actually try to avoid fentanyl, okay. But you remember now, all these people with substance use disorder have a hijacked brain. They have a brain that actually now all of a sudden these drugs over time and their substance use disorder and their addiction disease really doesn't cause the brain to allow them to have the reservations you would normally have and the fears you already have and the processes that allow you to make the proper decisions. Okay, so in many cases, but they don't know. They're still being fooled, and that's a shame. That's also fentanyl poison. If they actually take in fentanyl and dying, and they have no idea that the fentanyl is present, we consider that poison. Now that's not what the CDC considers it. But understand now, if they take in a regular drug that they're used to and it's not fentanyl, and then they take an excessive amount of it, that's a true normal overdose under most understood ways for many years before fentanyl even came around. Now, the fact that they don't even know what's in it is a lot more rare, a lot more, not rare, a lot more often that happens. Then we have this new category. And it's really a shame because this new category, okay, or novices that basically usually experiment not with heroin, not with cocaine, not with methamphetamine, not with the so-called hard drugs, okay, they messing around with what they think is a prescription drug, like a Xanax or a Percocet or an Adderall or a Vyonase. Okay, these are drugs that they may have taken themselves before by prescription. These are drugs that maybe their mother has or their father has. Okay, and it's true now. I would have to say, you got to say that they probably shouldn't be taking this unless they know it comes from a pharmacy. Okay, but sometimes they get it from a friend who was told that it came from a pharmacy, or they see it online and they really don't have the knowledge to realize that people would fake you out and put some kind of bait and switch type of situation. They have no idea that fentanyl is present, okay? And lots of times they'll take one pill and it kills them. We definitely look at that. And the parents that lose kids that way, they don't want to be this to be called an overdose, okay? And in fact, stigma is a big problem with everything about overdose, okay? And it wasn't even just about overdose. My son was murdered, okay, buying drugs. And the stigma surrounded that didn't allow the police to do what they would do. And I had the stigma of the embarrassment, you might say, of nobody wanted to talk about it. It was tough on my daughter in society because she lost her brother. And 20 years ago, the stigma was even worse, okay? Now it's eased up a bit, okay? But there's still a big stigma there. What we all find, and we don't want this to separate the groups, okay? These groups of people who know that they take in fentanyl maybe, but their brains are hijacked and they inadvertently overdose some kind of way and die, or those that are using drugs but are trying to stay away from fentanyl or don't know it's present, and then they die because they were kind of fooled into this. Lots of time it's cocaine or methamphetamine. They wouldn't suspect fentanyl in something like that, and yet it's put in there, and it's a killer. Okay, but then you got this third group now, and these parents. It's a shame, but sometimes these parents don't want themselves grouped with the other group of drug users or people with substance use disorder or the word addiction disease. And in all fairness, a lot of these kids don't have an addiction disease. Now, who knows? They may eventually develop one. And surely experimenting was maybe a start for some of them. Okay. But you do have to have some sympathy and more empathy for these kids who, in my day, all I did was like maybe alcohol. I snuck a shot of liquor from my daddy's liquor cabinet. Okay. Well, I didn't have to worry. It didn't happen. If it had been laced with fentanyl, I'd be dead. To them, a Xanax or a Percocet is that way. But one sort of good thing is those parents get a dose of stigma, okay, when they lose their kids, okay? And they don't really like it. Who does? Okay? And they definitely want it separated from those people. We who are trying to save everybody, all the kids that overdose, all the family tragedies, those who've had long-term substance use disorder, all categories. My mission as the pharmacist and my nonprofit and my pharmacist people association that I'm trying to develop, we want to save them all. Every life is important. Every family has had traveled a different road and are in different shoes. But if we can use these young kids in a sense, and I'd like to come up with a better word than use that, but use their situation, maybe to the advantage of everybody that's been fighting this anchor of stigma. We try to make progress in trying to reduce this problem and getting resources, getting politicians to help, getting the public aroused out of the public to stick together and say this could happen to anybody. But the stigma anchor has kind of held us back. Okay? But with these kids, I'm finding something different. Okay, since they are pretty much novices, and many of them are teenagers, and they don't have a history, they haven't had rehabs, they haven't had court dates. The parents totally, in most cases, know nothing about this type of thing. And they might buy it on social media, okay? I'm finding that the public in general is a little more sympathetic and great. Maybe that will lead us to not only stopping the fentanyl poison and these fake prescription tablets that are being made, okay, that are killing these kids, okay? It might help us address the entire problem. I want to give a real brief example on that of something that did happen in the gay community. Many, many years ago when AIDS was really getting to be a big killer, okay? I hate to say it, but most of the people in the public and the politicians really didn't care. I mean, most of them had a bad attitude about gays. Most of them were in permissive sex, okay? And so, it was like, they really couldn't get any traction to try to save the lives of these people dying from AIDS or in a kind of gay rights movement. And all of a sudden, a kid named Ryan White came along. And this kid was a really sweet and innocent kid, and he contracted it by a blood transfusion. He wasn't gay. He didn't have any sex that led to this. And the public woke up a little bit. Oh, he got AIDS? You mean you can get it some other way? And then they thought about all these people dying. Then all of a sudden they were even listening and having sympathy for those who died who were gay. It opened up a whole new awareness. It eventually led to getting control over the AIDS. It even led to gay rights movement. Okay. Now I know we're dealing with something different here, but I want to have a movement where we can turn things around and everybody gets on board and we start solving this problem. And these young kids that are novices, that are just about innocent, so to speak, okay, I think this is a big deal. People have to understand the difference here. And all those that are in our different segments, in our advocacy groups, and parents who have lost kids, we got to work together, okay? We want to stop the fentanyl poison with these young kids. We want to call it fentanyl poisoning, okay? But we don't want to disassociate it with those who die from drugs. Okay, we got 93,000 people dying from drugs. Okay?
Yes, Dan. I agree with you on everything you said. There's distinctions, but it is important for us to all work together. Just like you said, fentanyl is poisoning. And Can you tell our audience, elaborate on that? What is the difference between overdose versus fentanyl poisoning?
I think the biggest definition, the difference between the two is if you have even if you have the either you know that fentanyl is present and you try the drug anyway, okay, that's definitely an overdose. Or if you should have known, then there's a less of a level. Okay, I would still call that fentanyl poison, but some people might argue that case that well they should have known. And then what you have, I don't necessarily agree that that's the case, but some people do. Now, if you go to the novices now, most of these novices have no idea what fentanyl is. They think they take in a prescription drug called Xanax or Percocet. You have to call that a poisoning, okay? I mean, when you get killed by something that wasn't what you thought, okay, you've been poisoned. People a while back, if you remember, years back, some crazy people would take in and tainted Tylenol capsules. Okay, and people started getting sick or dying from taking Tylenol capsules. Okay, well, they weren't overdosing on Tylenol. Okay, they were being poisoned by fake stuff being, and guess what? The whole world went crazy with Tylenol. Okay, they now we got packages and lock capsules and what they call it tight wraps and they done things to seal the capsules and they got security in their plants. I mean, the whole world went crazy. Well, these kids don't have all that going for them. Okay, and they got a social media going on now right now that says to a kid, look, hey, you want to try Xanax like your mama took? Okay, or your brother-in-law took, or any dentist would write a Percocet. You want to try one? Okay, it's available. We'll ship it to you. And true, again, kids shouldn't be doing this, but they are really unaware it's fentanyl. And I know that for a fact because I went and talked to 200 kids in a middle school. Okay. And when I talked to those 200 kids in the middle school, I asked them, I said, any of y'all ever had somebody die of an overdose or somebody that you know has a real serious addiction problem? Half the kids in the audience raised their hands. Then I said, how many people know what fentanyl is? And maybe 20% of the people had heard about fentanyl. Okay, I don't know if they understood it, but they heard about it. Okay. Then I said, how many have heard that there are fake prescription tablets called Xanax? Somebody is making fake prescriptions and it has fentanyl and it kills. I got no hands. Okay. And I mean, I hope we're changing that. And as time goes by, maybe 10% of the kids are going to know, maybe 20% of the kids know. My goal is to get 100% to know. Those kids are definitely being poisoned. So a big difference is the degree of either knowing that it's present, then maybe you can't call it an overdose. And then if you should have known, well, that's kind of in a gray area. I would still call that an overdose. I would call that poisoning. Okay. And if they had no idea, they are definitely being poisoned.
Yes. Yes, definitely. It is fentanyl poisoning. This one pill can kill is very real, especially being recruited or looking for this on Snapchat and social media, these encrypted social media sites. Yes, it's totally just frightening. Middle school age, and who knows, it could be down in elementary school for all we know. And high school and college campuses across this country. Let's talk about the distinction, too, between pharmaceutical fentanyl versus illicit fentanyl.
Yeah, I do want to discuss that. As a pharmacist, a lot of people will say that. Well, why did somebody make fentanyl? Okay. Well, fentanyl it actually can be a good drug. It's been around for years. Okay. And if prescribed by a doctor and dispensed by a pharmacy, they make like patches. And it's a controlled release and it's a very, very low dose. And if used as properly prescribed, okay, it's not fatal and it can be an assistance with pain. It's a good pain reliever, okay. Then, of course, I will say this: we have had a situation where people have torn these things open, okay. If a person's brain is hijacked and he's hungry for this drug, he'll tear open a patch, he'll squeeze the juice out, he'll put it in a syringe and inject it. And many times that becomes fatal because you get the whole dose all at once. Okay, but what they're doing there is they take in basically a legal prescribed drug. okay? And they turn it into an illicit drug when they rip that package open and squeeze it, okay? And I know it can be a little hairy there, but that makes it illicit, okay? Now, if you're in a hospital, they use it something almost like an anesthesiologist would use it. If you have a surgery that's going to incur a great deal of pain, they're able to use less anesthesia because they can relieve the pain with this drug. But again, these are in a hospital setting. They have machinery on it that if some got away, they accidentally slightly overdose a person, they can quickly correct the situation. And if they're doing it right, they would never overdose the person. And they have the equipment where they can measure minute amounts. Remember, when it gets out into being illicit, where it's not made in a hospital or in a pharmacy, okay, and it's not made by a pharmaceutical manufacturer, you got untrained people mixing this thing, trying to put enough in to give somebody a high to try to help keep them addicted or get them addicted, okay? And in most of the cases, they don't really want to kill the person, okay, because it's kind of a customer, okay? But they just don't know how to get it right. And they don't kill everyone, okay, because people have different tolerances. And also sometimes they maybe accidentally mix it right, okay? We had two girls not long ago in our local area that they were high school seniors. They had a week off before graduation, okay? And both of them decided to experiment with a Percocet. From what I understand, one of the girls said, well, my mom used to take Percocet. It's not a big deal. And she said, I even snuck one out of her medicine cabinet once, and I took it, and I got a pretty good buzz. Okay? So the girls now, they don't have a mom right now that they can get one from. They get it from a friend, I believe, or a friend of a friend. I don't exactly remember how. They get this Percocet. They want to make sure it doesn't hit them too hard. They break it in half. They split it. One girl dies and one almost dies. And the whole difference between them dying is one girl weighed 100 pounds and one weighed 130. And both went to the hospital alive, but one girl's brain was dead. And the sad story about that was the mom and dad had to cross the stage and pick up their dead daughter's thing. And she was still in the hospital having her organs removed, donated to save other lives. And let me tell you, I've talked about this. We think it was the difference in the girl's weight that saved one. But it could have been when they actually made this tablet together, they stir their stuff up and then they put it in this press and they squeeze it. There could have been more fentanyl on one side of the tablet, and it could have just been luck of the draw. One girl may have gotten more fentanyl even though they split the tablet in half. Remember my thought process earlier on how lethal this is, how easy it is to get this wrong. If you have a penny, and on that penny it has like the date 1949 or whatever date it is, 2020, okay? Just a little 2020, if you just have a tiny line of fentanyl right there, that's enough to kill you.
Yes.
And yeah. So it's a crying shame, but there is illicit and there are practical purposes for some, but it's got to come from a pharmacy, okay? And if you're buying it out there, it's Russian roulette.
It is Russian roulette. You touched upon being a pharmacist. Can you tell us the distinction between prescription pills? I know you touched upon that, but how are these counterfeit pills being pressed, and who is doing this? I know it's the cartel and dealers are making these counterfeit pressed pills, and they're all straight fentanyl. Like you said, the children, the middle school, high schoolers think they're buying a Percocet, and actually Percocet is widely prescribed by dentists taking out wisdom teeth. And they think they're getting an Adderall, a Xanax, a Percocet, maybe an OxyContin, and then it's all straight fentanyl. So someone is deliberately, the dealers and cartel are deliberately making these counterfeit pressed pills. How are they doing that? And they look exactly like the prescription pills. It's like death by deception.
It is extremely hard. Maybe a pharmacist with a magnifying glass can tell the difference, okay? But these kids can't tell the difference, okay? And if they even Google it, they can't wholly tell the difference, to look and see. It's sad. And what I'm hearing is these presses usually, or you can go on Amazon and buy a pill press. Anybody can buy a pill press, okay? And I'm sure there are different higher qualities and lower qualities, but you can buy a pill press. And it's getting in two ways. In some cases, the cartels in Mexico are actually reproducing these tablets and look alike in a sort of semi-professional way of doing it, maybe. Okay, but it also they'll ship the concentrated fentanyl powder across, and it's a lot easier to get across the border. No matter how much we tighten the border, they can fly a pound of this stuff over in a drone. Okay, and that powder now can be distributed to somebody over here who has a press, and he takes the fentanyl powder and he mixes it with other ingredients. Okay, enough to make the whole tablet. Okay, and lots of times. Rarely is there any real drug in there. I use the term laced because in some instances it used to be laced. Now it's almost always pure fentanyl. Okay. Now when I say it's pure, it's not that whole tablet isn't pure fentanyl. There's binders, there's neutral particles that are in there that do nothing. But there's enough fentanyl. There's no other really drug. There's no real Xanax in it. There's no real Percocet in it. Okay. It's the fentanyl in there that does the job. Now they do this now. The other part of that equation is so it's made in Mexico and shipped here in tablets, and it's actually made sometime here locally by probably American citizens that are making this. There is big money in this. Okay, you know they can make one of these tablets. They can get the fentanyl shipped to them. They can probably make one of these tablets for maybe $1. Okay, and they might sell it for $30. I mean, that's 30 times your money. Okay, so if you're making 1,000 of these, okay, and it costs you $1,000 to make 1,000 of them, but you sell it for $30,000, you made $29,000 profit. And the other reason why they like fentanyl, okay, is because the supply is steady. The old opioid products really came from the opioid plant, which was grown in Afghanistan and other places. And sometimes it's hard to get. Okay, and it's more expensive, and the price can vary. In this case, it's easy to produce this stuff. Okay, and then the other thing that they know that they got going from, they do know it's dangerously potent, but they also know it's also extremely addictive, even more so. So if they don't kill the person, okay, they're getting accustomed for life, at least as long as their life lasts.
Yes, sir. In your opinion, if this crisis continues at the same rate as it's doing today, you mentioned before the CDC came out a couple of weeks ago with over 93,000 deaths. What is your projection? What do you think the projected rate of deaths will be in the year 2025 unless we get a handle on this in this country?
Wow, it's sad to say this, but it's almost difficult to predict. But I have been in touch with a guy that does graph work on this stuff, and he went back really, geez, I think 1979. Okay, and my son was murdered in 1999. Okay, so he's went back like maybe I don't know, it's 40 years or so. Okay, and it actually the progression on it was maybe approximately maybe a 30% angle increase. And sad to say, no matter what we did, it went up a little bit, down a little bit, up and down a little bit. But if you drew a line through those little ups and downs, it was all going in the same direction. Almost such that you could say, well, if we did 50,000 this year, next year it's going to be 52,000, 53,000. Okay, and there was some steadiness, and that's sad in of itself. Okay, that we wasn't able to turn that around. But then in about 2013, fentanyl first started, but it didn't really start hitting the streets, you might say, until 2015. All of a sudden, the curve on this thing took a different angle. It was now maybe like about a 60-degree angle, a totally out of line with the old issue. And now they've looked at that and they've said, and already it's following this new path now. Okay, because ever since then it went from 53,000 to 93,000 in just a couple of years. Okay, and if it continued going at this rate and we don't do anything about it, okay, and I hope the hell that doesn't happen. Let's hope it's a little bit of an aberration. Okay, 2025 we could easily have 345,000 overdose deaths. That's what the graph tells us. If this is the new graph, and it's proven itself for a few years now. Okay, if this is new graph, we're on target to do 345,000 overdose deaths. And remember, part of this now is what I call, sadly, the new market. The new market is, I've been working at this for 20 years. I never had novices getting fake prescription tablets. And now they've been dying for 2 or 3 years, but when they first started dying 3 years ago, it was kind of like, well, that's an oddball, okay? And it was like minuscule. It might have been less than 1% of the deaths. Not that if it's your kid, that's still a big deal, okay? But now we think it's 10% and climbing. And when you talk about 100,000 deaths, that's 10,000 teenagers that are novices that are dying. And if that's part of that growth curve that's really causing it to go up. And of course, fentanyl itself is just so deadly now. Now that we use it almost exclusively this, just the lethality of it has greatly increased. But it's sad. I hope this don't come across the wrong way, okay? But the old days of normal heroin, okay, there were people that could function on that for a while. There were people that could maybe go to a rehab and come back. I know we lost some along the way, but really a good bit of them functioned. Some of them recovered. Okay, and now they're getting robbed. This fentanyl is so lethal now; it's killing high percentages of them.
It is. It's killing everyone straight across the board. There doesn't seem to be any boundaries at all. We have deaths occurring every day, and the numbers are rising. I know that you and I have spoken to privately, and this can spoke off into so many different directions, but I'm going to ask you, what do you think needs to be done in this country to try to stop this growing epidemic? And I know that I'm going to bring you back for future dates and we can elaborate on all of this. But if you can just name one thing, I know there's a lot of things, more than one thing, but just one thing that you feel needs to be done to try to combat this right now.
It's awareness, but you have to electrify the public. You have to get the public to say, we're tired of this. We see how many are dying, okay? You're casting the stigma aside, okay? Let's not talk about whether they were morally wrong, which we know now it's not morality, okay? But we're going to cast all that aside. Let's work on solving the problem. Which gets back to my organization, okay, what I'm trying to do, okay? And of course now awareness in the high schools can at least let these kids know that there may be fentanyl present. Now, we can't stop them from still experimenting with that, but at least if they knew for sure, then they I hate to say that they're somewhat responsible, okay, but the truth is, all we can do is all we can do, okay? We don't want them dying because they didn't know. And we just don't have a nationwide campaign. So that's awareness is a very, very, very big part of it. Second thing is we got to electrify, with this awareness, we got to electrify the public. What I'm trying to do is we have scattered advocacy groups all around the country. And many of them are doing good work, and they're all trying different things to solve the problem, and different podcasts, and different things, and marches, and awareness in their town, and posters, and a lot of them are doing really great. And then they got people that's involved in recovery, and people trying to improve treatment. All these things are great, but what we don't have, okay, is our movement doesn't have the political clout that a group like the NRA has. The NRA has 5 million members, okay, and whether you agree with them or not, they get most of what they want. Politicians fear them, okay? And I don't know if that's exactly what we necessarily want. It's called fear, but we want a lot of influence. We want a real seat at the table. And me as the pharmacist now, I've been given, I think because of God, a lot of things have happened along the way while I'm here. Okay. Unfortunately, I lost my son, but then I had to go through a big story and be an unsung hero for 20 years. And then a Netflix docuseries. And there's other unsung heroes out there who haven't gotten what I got. But it's been a gift that's given to me. Okay. And I'm going to use it now. But that gift only usually gets me in the door and gets somebody to listen. That's powerful now. Because sometimes that was even hard to get for a lot of people. And they kind of halfway pay attention to me now because they see what I've went through, okay? Whereas before he was just a grieving dad, okay? Well, this is not just a grieving dad. He's actually done something, okay? But on the other hand now, when I leave now, they have a lot of forces coming in and, pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, the medical industry, the criminal justice industry. They all come in with their lobbying groups, and they usually have good arguments on why this shouldn't be, okay? And they also usually can give them money. And I'm trying to develop something called the Pharmacist People's Association. Okay. And with that, I want to have a membership of millions. Okay. And it's going to be everybody who's lost a kid, but not just those in recovery, those who are worried about the problem, the public that we incite that will step in with us. Okay. And if we get 5 million members, when I sit down before a congressman or a senator, I'll not only be able to present my case, but I'll say, by the way, now we have 5 million members. Okay, and these people may send emails. They may contact their local newspapers or write op-eds. They may go to the TV stations. They just might affect your election. Well, then we have a chance of winning. Okay, and we have something to counterbalance the other forces that have prevented us from getting what we need: resources, education, prevention, harm reduction. All the things that we need to actually reduce the problem. We've been hamstrung by this. And also, when we ignite the public and we start getting some of this going, maybe we can bring the stigma down. And if we bring the stigma down, this thing can, like mushroom. It's a dream of mine, okay? And what I've done now is I've named my website tunnelofhope.org. And I have a foundation, a nonprofit foundation called Tunnel of Hope. It's a nonprofit 501c3. And it was all based upon something that I think is mystical almost, something almost like God sent, okay? While I was doing all this hard work, obviously I was making bargains with God. God, if I can do this for you, will you do this for me, okay? And basically, God, please help me accomplish this. I want to save lives for you, okay? And I would go to work when I was trying to solve my son's murder. And later when I was trying to put doctors out of business, and later when I was trying to get the pharmacy monitoring program, and later when I was trying to do something with Purdue Pharma, all my missions, okay, I would have to drive through this tunnel of trees, okay? And this tunnel of trees is a narrow 2-lane highway in the parish where I live, the little town where I live. And you would drive through there, and it's kind of dark when you were in there, and there was light at the end of the tunnel. And I would pray while I was going through there. That was my extra. I mean, I pray all day, but I would focus nothing but prayer when I drove through there. It was mystical. And I started getting this sense of tunnel of hope, light at the end of the tunnel. So therefore, I eventually named, as soon as I could, my website with that. And when I ask everybody that joins, now when you go into my website, tunnelofhope.org, and you join in the Pharmacist People Association, but you're going to become a part of the light at the end of the tunnel.
And I joined. I'm one of the people that joined. It's and I know a lot of people have joined the Pharmacist People's Association. And I'm glad you brought that up. You got a little ahead of me. I was going to ask you all about that, but thank you for describing that to us. And I know that's what motivates you. What motivates you is, and what mission you're on, is just what you said. You're trying to save other people's lives and spare other families this grief. And that's the bottom line. And I understand you do have a pact with God. And I don't know, I can't say enough about that. That's just wonderful. And I'm going to link in the description on this podcast, I'm going to include the tunnelofhope.org website so people can sign into it and be a part of the light at the end of the tunnel that you just described. And Dan, Thanks. You are so welcome. Thank you again for your diligence, your genuine care, and your compassion. You have proven through your strong faith and good works that there is always hope, that people like yourself can make a true difference in this world, okay, especially concerning the fatal facts of fentanyl right now. Many blessings, and God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you. Amen.
Amen. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to this weekly podcast. Visit our website, which is linked below in the description. On the website, click on the social media icons, and feel free to share this podcast with others. And also, please leave your reviews and ask questions that you would like for me to ask our guest for our next episode dealing with the fatal facts of fentanyl. Enjoy your week. Many blessings.